This week on the Defiant podcast, we speak with Stani Kulichov, founder and CEO of Aave, one of the first leading protocols in the DeFi space. He's been around since the inception of decentralized finance itself, and now Aave Labs is the leading force in this completely new side of the Web3 universe, social media. But before we get into the Lens protocol, let's see what brought Stani into the space. Stani, it's so great to have you on the Defiant podcast.
Hey, Camila, nice to be here again.
Yeah, so we were just chatting. Stani was one of the very first guests on the Defiant podcast, like about 2 years ago. So a lot has happened since then. Excited to chat about the latest because, you know, you started Aave, one of the first lending protocols in DeFi. You've been around basically kind of since the start of like when DeFi was even called that, but now you are leading this totally different side of Web3, which is social media, and I feel that's such an important part of Web2 that needs to be disrupted, that I'm really excited to hear about how you're going about that and approaching it. But before we get into Lens, you know, for those podcast guests that haven't been around for 2 years and don't kind of know you, I'd love to just get like briefly your background, what led you to start Aave in the first place.
Yeah, surely. So I've been building the Aave protocol and ecosystem for the past, I would say, 5 or so years, and quite early those days. Aave is part of this movement of decentralized finance, where we build protocols which allow non-custodial access into different kinds of financial applications that have transparency. And those different elements were very important to me when I came early into the space, because what I saw, one of the earliest use cases with Bitcoin, and with the idea of being able to transfer value from one place to another without intermediaries in a very transparent fashion, that actually excited me to explore even further what else you can actually build. And when Ethereum came I think it was like 1 or 2 years into the ecosystem when Ethereum already was existing. But for me, like the most fascinating thing was that with the Ethereum concept of Ethereum virtual machine, you could actually have full applications running on the blockchain. And because of the nature of the history, that one of the first use cases was to solve, by using blockchain, solve the transfer of value with Bitcoin. Obviously, one of the exciting things for me was also what other interesting financial application and use cases we could solve with using the blockchain, and by being able to deploy applications into the Ethereum. So that was very early. So we created first proof of concept called ETH-Lend, short for Ethereum lending. And that was probably second or third so-called DeFi application back in those days.
When was this, like 2017, 18 time?
2016, we started to build. In 2017, we were in mainnet. And that was before any stable coins were on Ethereum network. So it was super early days. But for me, that was fascinating because DeFi started to build as an ecosystem. So we saw more other kind of applications. We saw Uniswap coming more with the pooled liquidity model, and many of the other primitives inspired us to build the Aave protocol, which is now securing roughly from 7 to 15 billion worth of value on the smart contracts across multiple networks. So the protocol itself is deployed on Ethereum, on Polygon, Avalanche, and also layer 2s, Arbitrum and Optimism. And those who don't know, the way the Aave protocol works is that you can supply cryptographic assets into the protocol, earn interest and use those assets as a collateral to finance another opportunity, pay your tuition, your mortgage, or buying a car or some other investment opportunity. And the Aave team can't go and actually change arbitrarily how the protocol works. So there's a formalized governance process, meaning that it's governed by the Aave DAO. So the Aave community members have to come together and vote about how the protocol will be changed in the future.
So from there, from building one of the biggest lending protocols on Ethereum and DeFi, and Aave has seen just amazing growth so far since 2017. I think it's kind of holding the most value locked in any lender outside of Maker. So, it's really consolidated its place as one of the top kind of leading lending protocols in the space. So, you have a lot going on there. Like you have even your own stable coin, obviously kind of running the Aave DAO, like all this stuff related to like lending and money markets. So why go into Lens? Like it seems, just such a whole kind of different area. Where did that idea come from? And if you can talk a bit about kind of the genesis of this, like when did you start thinking about this? Like how did it start to formalize into this actual kind of decentralized social media protocol?
Yeah, I mean, the way we've seen the whole Web3 ecosystem forming was from financial applications, mainly because I don't think like finance is the most easiest things to build on chain. In fact, I think it's the most hardest. But also those applications that are working very well on chain, such as the Aave protocol, are extremely good examples of how valuable the blockchain infrastructure is for what we're building and how much transparency it's bringing to the financial ecosystem. But when actually, in my opinion, like the blockchain technology can be used in other categories, and we've seen recently with the NFT ecosystem that it allows creators to go directly to their own communities and have that relationship with their fan bases and create their own collections and value their social capital within that community. But so for me, like there was always this idea of blockchain can be used beyond financial transactions, and there's a lot of value you can actually store and reflect on chain, and there's interesting use cases. But actually, for me personally, I started building social applications before I was building financial applications. So the way I started to learn programming is by building web applications, and that was the time when, for example, very early on, Twitter was one of the first applications that started to grow in the community where I was participating, which was the Ruby on Rails community. So that was the framework that was used to build Twitter. And at the same time, that was the evolution of the Web2 social and Web2 internet, where internet became not only a place where you self-host a web page or host it through a cloud provider, but actually you have these platforms where you can go and actually create content and interact with other peers across globally. That was when Reddit was getting more traction and big as well, and the whole kind of like a more what we know today as Web2 social space. And for me, the exciting thing was that first time ever, you don't need to be necessarily a developer or host a homepage, and you can actually produce content, and you can be a creator on the internet. You can create even shops, e-commerce, and it was a very empowering movement. And I still think Web2 and Web2 social has been a big contributor in empowerment of people and democratizing access to information, and also access to different kinds of goods and services as well, and creating opportunities for people. What we're doing with Web3 and the Lens protocol is essentially taking a step further, where we are seeing that we created this amazing infrastructure, but at the same time, we created in a way where we created a lot of big platforms that are actually, we're creating all the data and all the user interactions, and we're providing content, but essentially we are providing a lot of data for the platforms that are then used to understand what we might like and what we want to give our attentions to and what we will be interested in buying. So the users became more of a product. So with decentralized finance and seeing how you could actually create a lot of accessibility and remove this trust between centralized parties, you can actually strengthen the ownership of the users. And that's where the whole idea of Web3 is, where you create user-owned networks, but you bring the power back to the users. And that's what Lens protocol essentially is trying to solve.
Got it. Yeah, the promise of this Web3 social media landscape where users are owners of their own information and data, I think is something that's very inspiring for most of us in this space. But okay, to just clarify the link with Aave, these are two completely separate projects, or is there a way that Aave and Lens work together?
They're separate projects. So the way we work in the Aave team actually is that we have a separate Aave pod, which is focusing on contributing into the Aave ecosystem. And the Aave ecosystem is in a good shape in the sense that there is multiple contributors that are building and developing the protocol further. And we're one of those contributors. And the DAO itself is self-sustainable. So it's earning income from the protocol activity and using that income to essentially reward those contributors across the space and also give additional grants. And then we have a separate team that is working directly on the Lens protocol, but we share resources in the sense that we have this incredible know-how of years of building smart contract-based protocols, and that's very valuable for us. So there's a slight separation, but at the same time, we're all kind of like a part of a bigger family.
Got it. So when you say we, you're talking about Aave company, like the development company behind Aave and now also behind Lens.
Yeah, exactly. The software company.
Got it. So it's interesting that you're saying that Aave has reached a point now, like the Aave DAO has reached a point that it's self-sustaining, that it's getting revenue from its own on-chain activity, paying contributors that way. And so now you can allocate some of the resources of Aave company to produce this other protocol that's kind of the social media protocol, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's kind of like a part of the bigger idea that there's a lot more space to actually innovate. So our core idea within Aave has been that we want to innovate, and we're not only looking to categories like, for example, how we could innovate in decentralized finance, but we're always looking into actual the output. So, for example, like what kind of impact we can create if we build a new protocol, what kind of impact we can create in decentralized finance, or how we can empower users when they have their own social graph and their own on-chain profile, and change the ownership and the dynamics, how we interact with the social media today. And that's kind of like what is the most valuable for our team when we think about what kind of things we can build.
In the last 10 years, over $100 billion worth of crypto has been lost or stolen specifically because of poor key management, scams, and hackers. My new sponsor, ZenGo Crypto Wallet, wants to change the game entirely by creating a crypto wallet with no private key vulnerability. ZenGo aims to be the most secure Web3 wallet, and the best place to keep your crypto, NFTs, and assets secure. After all, with no private key to steal, your crypto assets and NFTs are much more difficult to hack. Get started at zenco.com/defiant and use code DEFIANT to get $20 back on your first purchase of $200 or more. That's cengo.com/defiant. Terms and conditions apply, so check out their site for details. Lens is seen to be one of the first user-owned social media platforms. But for users themselves coming in for the first time, what does that look like? Will it echo models of Facebook and Twitter in the Web2 space, or will it be something entirely new? Okay, so now getting deeper into Lens and how it works, because I get kind of why you started it. I get kind of the motivation of this user-owned social media platform. But, for people just like coming to this idea for the first time, like, how does it actually work? Is it like Facebook and Twitter where you create an account and you have a profile and you post stuff online and have followers? Or is it something else? Is it kind of, instead of a profile, you have a wallet? If you just kind of can break down the details on just like in practice, what does this actually mean?
Yeah, in practice, it really resembles the mechanisms that we know today in social media. So effectively, the way it works is that as a user, you create a profile, and that profile is tokenized as an NFT. So you can effectively store it in your wallet, or you can transfer it to somewhere safer and delegate the power to post from somewhere else. And once you create your profile, you can start publishing. That means that you can publish any type of content on a protocol level. So you can publish videos, audio, text, or any other supported file formats. And then you can also follow different profiles that are already existing in the Lens protocol. One thing to note is that the protocol is created for applications. So essentially, the applications can choose how they want to store the data or reflect the data storage. So for example, the data can be reflected into IPFS, on-chain, or something like RV, or you can even use still something like cloud or self-hosted data. So the protocol, it's very flexible on how you as a developer or a social media application builder, you want to use it. But regardless, those features are also available for the end user as well.
So Lens is right now a protocol, so like a set of rules and kind of standards for publishing, so that users can, one, create a profile that's minted as an NFT and allow those profiles, that the users behind those profiles, to post different kinds of information. Can be video, text, audio, whatever, right? In like different kinds of files. And then separately, that same protocol allows, because it's open source, so anyone can build on top of it, and so developers can then build different applications on that protocol. And does that mean that Lens users who are posting their content, are they automatically can they automatically just be a part of all of the applications that are being built on the Lens protocol just because they have a profile on Lens? Is that how it works?
Yeah, it's they can be part of all the applications. So one of the key ideas about the Lens profiles is that you need to only create once your profile, and essentially, if there's an application built on top of the protocol, you can go to the new application, and effectively you don't need to create a new profile. So you have this kind of like a composability between different applications. Well, I would say more of a portability. But also, a new application can actually choose as well, let's say, that's what kind of content they want to show to the user. So the benefit of having a common social graph is that you have all this information available. It's more easier for the user to actually switch between different applications. But at the same time, it means that those applications, they need to also curate their experience for the users. So for example, if you're creating an application that is focusing on video, you might want to only pull some of the content from other video applications that are actually the same nature of and aligned to the same vision that you might be building. The benefit here is that every single application that is onboarding users, the other rest of the applications are benefiting from that. So they're effectively building the social graph together.
How do applications benefit from each other? Can you go into that point?
The way they can benefit is that each of the different applications, they might have their own kind of a focus point or user experience. So the focus might be, for example, in certain type of content type, or specifically certain type of interest graph, for example. So let's say we have an application that might have an interest graph of a particular sport, and some other one might have another sport, and maybe someone builds another application that is picking all the content from sports in general. That's just like a simple example, but also the way it works is that when you build something on top of the Lens protocol, you can submit metadata where there is the application ID. There's also the focus, which type of content the application is focusing upon, the content itself, meta tags, and effectively this creates a bigger data graph that those applications can use. But also, besides the applications, there is also a middle layer. So for example, there is a Lens API that is indexing all the data from the Lens protocol, the decentralized social graph. And that API is servicing then for the applications what kind of data they want to actually pull from the whole graph. And the idea is that that Lens API is going to be more decentralized in the future as a node network. So anyone can actually run their own node or take the data from a service provider, and it opens up doors to create different kinds of algorithms as well. So just a practical example is that when you use Twitter, you pretty much have to use the experience they provide and the algorithms they're providing. So you don't, as a user, you don't have any choice. But for example, in the future and with Lens protocol, you can actually choose your algorithm. You can choose your application that is fitting the content and the need you have, but also on the algorithm level. So it creates more flexibility and freedom for the user as well.
That's so interesting. So, okay, to bring it kind of back to kind of the Web2 sort of analogy, it would be as if, say, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, if they were all building on top of the same protocol layer kind of infrastructure, then anyone with an account in that protocol would immediately be able to take all their data that they've ever posted on each one of those different applications, kind of depending for whatever data those applications filter. But for example, so early on, like I used Facebook a lot more than now. Like now I don't ever go on Facebook. But there's like this whole history of like, I don't know, like my college pictures, or well, maybe I don't even want to see that, but you know, but there's like this whole history of like Facebook post that I just like don't see anymore. Maybe I could like port all that information to Twitter if I wanted to, right? If that's kind of the social media network that I use more often now, I wouldn't have to lose the information on kind of the other applications that I'm not using, because all that information is just shared across the base protocol. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, so essentially like the way the internet is built, for example, today is that we have a lot of protocols that we are using to have this portability in terms of like connectivity. But when it comes to the application layer, and we look at Facebook's and Twitter's, the platforms itself, they don't have portability, because one of their competitive modes is that they're able to create the network effect within that platform and lock the users. So if Twitter changes, if you love Twitter today, but it changes their policies, they maybe change the user experience or the algorithms in a way that you might not enjoy the application anymore. Maybe you're also a creator who you post a lot of content and you get traffic to your, let's say, homepage. You can't actually take your audience out of there, so you can't do a digital exit out of the platform. And that's how it's built, so they can grow and grow the network effect they have and use it for their advantage. But then when we look into Lens, effectively, we're bringing the portability to that profile layer, so that you create the profile once, but then you can actually flag what data you want to have, let's say in one application, like let's say a Facebook, and what do you want to have in, let's say, Twitter. So there's ability on that middle layer level to flag, for example, whether you want to show everything you have, or let's say whether you actually want to just have things that you want to talk about your work in one application, things you want to talk with your friends in another one. And that's like the key difference here, is that the protocol is very flexible how you use it. So the idea is that we build it in a way where we are very unopinionated. So effectively, you can choose either store the reflected data to on-chain or IPFS, or store it privately. So you could effectively create a more private application, or more public, depending on the use case. And also on the version 2 of the protocol that we are working now, currently when you create a protocol, you choose a handle, but in the future you can mint a profile in a permissionless fashion, and you can use a canonical namespace that already exists, or you can use your ENS, or if you are an application builder, you're building something new and you want to create a completely new namespace, you can also do that. So effectively, in one way, it creates the data portability, data liquidity, but also it creates the ability to have that flexibility on what data you want to have in which platform.
Got it. Super interesting. Okay, so if you have this ability to port your data anywhere, and like you said, the reason why you can't do that in Web2 is because there's these walled gardens that allow applications to grow their moat, their kind of market size. So what's the, how does the economics work for applications on Lens? Like how do they monetize? How do they build their kind of network effects if anyone can just like very easily leave and take their profiles and information elsewhere?
Yeah, I think the ability to leave is actually good from the user perspective, and also for those applications that is just starting and they effectively need traction. For the user, it means that first time ever, the algorithms and applications, they have to actually work for you and provide value for you. And the way I see monetization aspect is that when you create these different applications, obviously it depends on the use case itself. There's a couple of monetization tools built into the protocol itself, because whatever content you post within the Lens protocol, so let's say if it's content of audio, video, or even just basic text, you can actually, as a user, collect those content as NFTs. So I, as a creator, I can actually set that my particular post might be free to collect, so anyone can come and collect it for free. Maybe you can only collect it for 24 hours, but also I can set fees to collect. So for example, I can set that you can collect this post if you pay $2, for example, or let's say 5 USDC or 10 Matic, or even more, or you can create an auction-based systems. So effectively, there's a concept of having user-generated content as an asset class, and it's kind of like a similar model what we have in the NFT ecosystem now. We're buying these various NFT collections because we want to be part of the community, and we want to be part of supporting the community and the creator itself. So it's taking that as a concept and expanding into social. And then obviously, if you have a big audience, you can also amplify the content that you see across the social network and amplify to your own audience with so-called mirroring. And you can get mirror fees that the creators are splitting from the collect fees. So those things you can actually, on the front-end level, share with the protocol itself. And it's not the first time when actually front-ends are monetizing with protocols. OpenSea is a good example where they're using protocols behind the scenes, and because they have this activity on the front end, that's where a lot of the monetization happens. But also, I believe that there's going to be opportunities to monetize also for the algorithm creators, but also users are willing to pay for actually getting better experience and using applications that they really love and are not just there because their whole audience is stuck in that one platform.
Okay, so is the idea that you're seeing a future where you're paying for content in social media? So say kind of I follow some influencer on Instagram. In this kind of Web3 world, I would be paying them some small fee in order to follow them, to kind of reward them for their content creation. And then the application, I guess, would take a fee off of those transactions. Is that how it would work?
Yeah, so you can. A good example is that if you have a music curation application where you see music creators effectively creating content related to music, it can be actual songs, albums, or just even something related to the music like text or background information. All that can actually be collected as NFTs, and part of those fees can go to the application, part of, let's say, protocol treasury, and most of them for the creators. And the amazing part is that the creator is the one who is setting the fees, and there is the competition between the applications, so they need to provide value as well. And I like to think of it as the same way as, like, I think it's the best way to monetize digital goods, because, for example, if you hear music today on radio, obviously someone is paying for that, but it's not actually people are paying for the artist. The hearing, let's say, music in a radio or watching, for example, a movie, that's more of a distribution, and it's more of like the monetization model we have created in the past. But here you can actually have a verified NFT of a content that is created by a particular creator itself. and using that as a monetization tool. But obviously you can add more towards that. Those are just base monetization models we have added into the protocol, and you can actually add more. And the protocol itself is very module-wise. So you can add the example that you gave where you pay to follow for someone, you subscribe, so you can add pay to follow module. You can create a module where you could redirect your DeFi yield to particular creators. That can be done. So the beauty is here that the smart contract exists on chain, the protocol, so you can create on-chain composability and use DeFi and everything else that is built on top of the same network. But you can choose also not to use and have some of the functions off-chain as well.
Accelerate your Web3 journey with Apex Pro. Apex Pro is leading participants with diverse backgrounds and knowledge to a new era of Web3 social trading. Access perpetual contract trades with up to 20x leverage on popular USDC collateralized trading pairs on a powerful trading engine. Scale to accelerate trades and increase usability while preserving your privacy and security. Grow and manage your wealth fairly and transparently with Apex Pro. To swap crypto, a user has to choose among hundreds of DEXs on multiple networks, all offering different rates and fees. Do you want to avoid that hassle? Swap on 1inch, a DEX aggregator built to get you better rates than any single DEX. Enjoy unlimited liquidity across multiple networks and top-level security. Get 1inch on your phone now or swap on 1inch.io. In Web3, Lens would aim to give power back to users, such as influencers, to be paid directly from their audiences for the content they create. But is there a potential for users to be priced out of that content behind a token-gated paywall? The norm in Web2 is free-to-view content. Are added incentives of decentralization and data control enough of a carrot to justify the added price? Is there more to it? Do you think that, a future that social media is being monetized and there's kind of a price on content? Is there a risk that this will just exclude a big portion of the population that just doesn't have the available resources and income to be paying for this type of content? Maybe somebody and I honestly, I imagine this is a huge portion of the population. They would rather give their information to Facebook and Instagram in order to use it for free than own your information and pay if it means kind of using these services for free. It seems like a lot of people just value this over privacy and decentralization at the moment. So what do you think about kind of just like this huge part of the population that just wants to use this stuff for free?
Yeah, I mean, most of the content that is created for collection on Lens protocol is actually free. It's just a small percentage that is set for pay to collect. I personally want to see. I'm a big believer of the free NFTs and also charging for the content. They both have exciting use cases, and you can, as a creator, use both of them. The cool part here is that you can collect those NFTs, and some of them might become culturally relevant or valuable for that community at a later stage. So you have that financialization part as well. So in one way, it's not only about kind of like being able to collect what is paid, but actually you contribute to the ecosystem the way you might see fit. So for someone, it might be buying those and collecting those free NFTs. But for example, what the protocol itself aims to do from the impact perspective is actually unlock your social capital and ensure that you have the ownership for what you create and the ownership between your audience. So let's say that you might not create a lot of content, but you have a lot of following. And if you see some interesting content, you can reflect that to your audience and earn as a curator as well. And curators are kind of like a creator class within the not just in social landscape, but in general, which are undervalued. So we create a lot of Spotify playlists, for example. We might create who to follow lists, and we're not rewarded as the users. So that user base is something that we're elevating as well within the protocol. But I think I do believe there's a lot of value in the free NFTs, but also value that you can create your own community and your own follower network. And that's the value you actually have. And maybe someone from another network might be interested in what you're creating on the protocol level.
Okay, so you're saying that not all content will have a price and will need a subscription or will have to be paid for, and maybe the way that applications monetize is through kind of the fraction of the content that's in that application that does have a price, but maybe the large majority of content that's created and of users aren't actually having to pay for that. Is that right? It's like,
yeah, exactly. And there's also when you look at how the Web2 social media works today, effectively the users, as you said, they are giving their data. They're constantly training machine learning algorithms to know exactly better what they might like, what is relevant for them. And effectively, they're selling their attention, and also they're selling their buying power, purchasing power at the same time. So all that ad revenue that, let's say, Facebook and Twitter is getting, it comes from the pockets of the users itself. So there are, of course, user bases that are paying most of the for most of the monetization with the Web2 social landscape, but most of the users obviously might not be consuming anything that is advertised to them. And I think it's just very important to create better models of monetization than advertisements. There's a lot of issues for them. I don't see like advertisements necessarily dying completely. Like there's a way where you can amplify content that is relevant for your audience and do collaborations from creator to creator perspective. But the way it's done today in mass advertisement with Web2 social, it leaves not pretty much no choice for the users than actually consume those or see those ads unless they pay some sort of a premium feature. And I think opening up the doors where saying that you don't have to be locked in a platform and you can actually have portability, and now algos and applications, they need to focus on what's valuable for you. They have to compete on your actual value. I think that will change the game completely.
Yeah. And so do you think that there's also the opportunity for users to be paid directly for their data by the applications they're using? So it's like a more kind of voluntary way of kind of sharing your information. Kind of you're consenting to it. Because you're getting paid or because you are getting something in return. Is that something that's kind of part of this plan?
I think what's valuable is to use your Web3 footprint, because in one way that's your social capital as well. And based on your Web3 footprint to effectively use it in a way where you can actually reward certain kind of behavior or create accessibility, for example. So, and you can do, for example, opening up some interesting features for the users. But in the Lens protocol, you can do a lot of that on a follower basis. So, for example, I can create content and only, let's say, my follower token IDs 1 to 100 can access that content and reveal it. That's something that can be done, or they can actually access to a content that has a redeemable part that is, for example, physical. So you can expand towards that ecosystem. So what NFTs and smart contracts are good at doing is verifying data, essentially, that something happened in the previous block or previous time, and using that for unlocking future value. And I think the biggest challenge that I have seen with many of the, especially with the NFT ecosystem, but in more Web3 space, is that we create a lot of value amongst ourselves. So we can verify who participated in the Aave governance, who basically minted an NFT 2 weeks ago of a particular NFT project. But there's a lot of people coming into the space that don't have that Web3 social footprint, and that creates a bit of inequality in the social capital we have, because the way the Web3 ecosystem works, it currently doesn't recognize the off-chain social capital that you have generated on Instagram or elsewhere. And I think this is where a lot of value comes in actually being able to bring that capital through oracles or other ways, and actually ensure that the newcomers that are coming into the space, they feel that there is actually equality in that sense, that what they have achieved previously could be valuable in Web3 as well.
But how would that work? Like, would they be able to use their Web2 content on Lens, or how would they kind of increase their social capital as a newcomer?
So the way the protocol is built is that it's very agnostic what kind of algorithms you can actually create and use them from the middleware for this application that has been built. So you can create an application that uses, let's say, your Web3 footprint, but also it could use something that is off-chain. So you can connect your Twitter, get your some of the Twitter data, and create value out of that if you want to do that. So that is happening. That is possible on the middleware layer, and it's more of like an opportunity for data engineers to come and actually find different ways of using the off-chain data in the social graph as well. Some like simple example, I've seen someone build in hackathon a kind of like a migrator where you can migrate like all your Twitter content into the Lens protocol. It's a like very simple example, but I believe more in just having some significant data points that are valuable to you, and you can port them on chain. That might be helpful for you to establish your social presence on chain.
That's so interesting. Do you see a future where this social profile would be ported onto DeFi applications?
It could be fascinating. I mean, some of these profiles that are going to get more and more traction, and they might have ongoing revenue for the NFT collections. Maybe it could be an interesting way of using as working capital finance through DeFi and financing the growth, because a profile can be your personal profile, but it can also be a brand that you created and are representing. But also that data could effectively be used as something like a social score, reputation score that could be used in decentralized finance, and have maybe even those under collateralized loans that everyone has been talking for the past ages on DeFi.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, so your social score achieved on Lens could potentially allow you to get an under collateralized loan on Aave.
Exactly. And there's actually, because the protocol is modularized, so you can build various different collect modules. We have a few community builders that are doing that. There's one specific module that actually takes all the revenue that you get from the collects and is essentially depositing to the Aave protocol, so you can earn more as a creator. So this is the beauty of how we designed our architecture. So we rely upon the smart contracts to have this verification and programmability between these modules, but also everything that exists on chain. But then it's up to users and applications to actually decide how the content is reflected. Do you want to use off-chain, decentralized file storages? So it's kind of like an interesting approach that we have taken, because we're firm believers that using smart contract based logic is interesting, and the Web3 social footprint that you have is valuable for your social graph.
In the roller coaster that's crypto right now, traders are looking for ways to smooth the bumpy ride. Pod's Yield wants to help with just that. Pod's staked ETH volatility vault is designed to earn more both when ETH price goes up and when ETH price goes down. It's not a matter of if, but when the price will move. Pods uses volatility in holders' favor and makes more ETH whenever the price bounces. Find out more on pods.finance. We've talked about how users can monetize these platforms, but what about the Lens protocol and Aave? What's the business model for them moving forward? Also, how populated is Lens right now? And is a token on the horizon?
Yeah, our over the years, our business model has been pretty much building protocol infrastructure and being part of the contributors, whatever we build and give to the community ownership. With the Lens protocol, I think it will follow most likely the similar path, that maybe at some point the protocol goes to user ownership. It already has decent traction. So we launched the mainnet 2 months ago, and there's over 63,000 profiles minted on Lens. And actually, as of today, we have over 1 million follow NFTs minted. So whenever you follow someone, so Camilla, when I follow you, I mint a Camilla follow NFT, and whatever you are posting, that latest post is reflected in the follow NFT if I go to OpenSea or wallet. So it creates this kind of like a protocol level communication channel with your audience. And we have over 350,000 NFTs collected as well, which has brought roughly 200,000 worth of revenue directly for the users. So every single profile on average is earning $3.50 in the Lens protocol, which is quite cool because it goes directly to the users. Some go to the users that are mirroring the content for their own audiences. And the protocol itself, it has a fee collection built in, but it's set to 0. So that's something that the community can at some point activate if they have community grants that they want to pay. And also you can, as a core, like as a developer, you can actually contribute to the core smart contract base and build additional monetization tools and other modules. So the protocol is completely open source. Anyone can actually use it on their own purpose.
Wow, that's so interesting. Okay, so 63,000 Lens profiles, a million follows. So, okay, like a million people are following each other. You said 350,000 NFTs. So are those just like pieces of content that have been minted as NFTs?
Yeah, so it might be essentially, it might be a meme. It might be, for example, a video. For example, you can post your podcasts into the Lens protocol and your fans can collect, and even like you can charge for the collection, and maybe that's kind of like a equivalent to tipping. So those NFTs are essentially, they can be any content, and it's actually quite fascinating how the meme culture could be empowered, because we've seen retroactively memes being bought afterwards. So we saw with the Doge meme, and we saw with the Nyan Cat meme that basically those NFTs were auctioned later in time, like 10, 15 years after the creation. But here you can create a meme that can go viral and have collect fees, and you might earn revenue, and then someone else might actually even sell that meme later. And again, and you have this economical feedback loops, which is interesting, and that generates value to that particular content. So the same way as I think this is very fascinating, maybe for you from a writing perspective, because you're a writer. Effectively, we've seen a lot of digital art being collected as NFTs, but I see a lot of value in collecting content itself, and especially written content. And the fact that something like real content, like the Constitution, was being bid between like 40 to 50 million US dollars, having something in digital form could be equally as valuable, because it's the idea behind of it and the history that goes into that piece of content that creates that social capital and social value. And that's, I think, is the future.
Very cool. So I could post the Infinite Machine as an NFT on Lens, and maybe people could bid on it.
Yeah, exactly. I hope you do.
Nice. Yeah, definitely. Okay. And you said 200,000 in, is that dollars in kind of fees have been created?
Yeah, in roughly 2 months, and it's still beta. So this is very fascinating. So the protocol isn't yet permissionless. That's the version 2 that we are working on. So the way you are able to access the protocol is effectively that we have been whitelisting different communities, Boys Club, Developer DAO, if you hold particular NFT like a Crypto Coven, and Poly NFT and bunch of other impactful projects across the Web3 ecosystem. We whitelisted the addresses to come and actually claim their Lens profile. And we are effectively using the on-chain data to create the early user group within the Lens protocol and see how they are interacting. But our more longer vision is actually not just empower the people who are already in the Web3 space, but also the newcomers. So we're putting a lot of effort into making it very easy to interact with Lens protocol. So in the middleware with the Lens API, we created also a dispatcher. And dispatcher effectively is a relayer which pays the gas costs. So the transactions are gasless. And a few days ago, we hit 2 million gasless transactions. On top of that, it allows you to delegate signing to that dispatcher, so you don't need to sign for MetaMask transactions, which means that you're interacting with some of these applications like the community built Lenster and LensTube and the Orb and whatnot in a way where you would interact with any Web2 social media application. So as if it's normal application and the blockchain logic happens in the backend. And this brings us closer to the experience that we have in normal application that we are used to without seeing MetaMask pop-ups. Next step is actually bringing it further into mobile and then make it even easier for users to generate their Ethereum address and have this kind of like a low transactioning account that they use to interact with the Lens protocol through those different applications. So we're focusing quite a lot on actually pushing the whole Web3 ecosystem closer to the mainstream, because we believe that the mainstream will not come by buying something like Ethereum or Matic. They actually will come by interacting with the blockchain with non-financial transactions. And some later users will become active or passive DeFi users. So I think that's where a lot of value comes. And that helps the narrative of blockchain that it's not only for finance, there's actually a lot of doors that it's opening and magnificent use cases that are empowering our communities.
So fascinating. So this dispatcher, is it kind of like just like an automation, like a robot that's signing transactions and paying for transactions, like working on the background? And if so, like where is that money actually coming from? Like who is actually paying for these transactions?
Currently, it's paid by the with the Polygon grant that we have received, and effectively there's not much of the gas cost isn't that big of an issue in the network this size. But over time, obviously, if the Lens protocol becomes widely adopted, then the solution is actually move the transactioning into a layer 2, where we can scale in a way that the more we have users, the more cheaper the transactioning will occur. But for now, the Polygon ecosystem has been quite nice because there's already a proof of stake, the block times are faster. But in the future, I think layer 2 is the way to scale and reduce transaction costs as well.
Makes sense. You've been talking about making Lens permissionless and kind of user-owned. That obviously kind of sparks the idea of a token. Is that kind of planned down the line?
I mean, we've been focusing quite a lot on the product itself and how it works and making sure that Lens protocol actually is a utility and usable for our ecosystem and actually can be beneficial for the users. I mean, so far the data looks incredible. We had a lot of good feedback and we learned a lot during the past months. We've been building the protocol obviously way more longer, roughly a year and a half. But at the same time, during the past recent months where we had more hackathons, more developers building on top, we actually learned how to improve the protocol. So I think our main focus is the Lens protocol version 2. And that's going to be like most of the work and heavy lifting going towards.
Okay, so V2 is a focus, and I guess token TBD down the line. This is also so fascinating. When do you think kind of the like, how do you think the mainstream user comes in? Like, how do you see this kind of in 5 years? And how does it reach just the everyday audience that's not involved in Web3 at the moment?
I mean, we're pretty far in terms of like the user experience, because the user experience can be very optimistic. So you see when you post content, you can see that happening right away in the user interface, and the blockchain logic can happen in the backend. And meanwhile, where you're scrolling the feed, for example, and if something breaks in that blockchain interactioning, then you get a notification to resubmit a transaction, or it can be resubmitted in the backend. It can be very optimistic. So it's more about how we manage securing, for example, the user keys, and part of the Lens protocol version 2, what we've been also thinking about and focusing on improving the way we have the delegation. So you could delegate your posting power to a specific address and with, let's say, certain functions. And so making that easier and easier to generate a low transactioning address as well for the users that don't have Ethereum addresses now, just by signing with their emails and making it actually as if you're using, like, you should be using like the feeling to use blockchain should be as if you are using any Web2 application, and just that blockchain logic happens in the back end. So that's one thing. And then the interesting applications. So in my opinion, like, if folks are building, and whoever is building like an application which is kind of like trying to replace Twitter or Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, it's going to be a very hard game because those applications, they already have their social networks. They're quite strong networks. And for example, Twitter, they're still innovating. There's some things happening, interesting incremental updates and so forth. What's going to take this technology forward is the actual use cases and building new applications that are attracting interest graphs together. So we have to build something new to win something old. And I think that's the way to go. And just by restructuring and creating like a, let's say, Web3 Twitter or Facebook isn't going to take us far. It's about actually creating those new parties where people want to go.
Oh, I love that take. I know it's really early, but what are some of the kind of encouraging, kind of innovative applications that you're already seeing that are doing something that's different? Or maybe it's too early and at this stage we're just kind of replicating what's already out there?
That's an interesting take. Like a lot of the things that's been built in hackathons where we got most of the feedback, and I'm super happy that we choose this path. We've seen developers actually rebuilding current applications that exist in Web3 into Web2. So there's Lenser, LensTube, and there are actually ways to more of explore the content. I'm quite excited about a product called Orb. And Orb is using Lens protocol for the feed. And also the main idea of the application is that you can actually, as a non-Web3 user, learn about Web3 and go different kinds of courses. And then you get rewards as NFTs. And then you can post that achievement on your feed. And at the same time, you can also, in your profile, add different kinds of portfolios, what you have done before, your achievements, where you worked before, schools, and post them into the feed. And effectively, why this is important is that many of the Web3 companies are growing quite fast, and we need a lot of talent into the space outside of the Web3 ecosystem, and the learning is a big part of that. So you might have big companies like Coinbase, for example, where you have employees that know every single yield farm and NFT drop, to people who might not interact at all with, let's say, Ledger hardware wallet. So you have this kind of like a differences between Web3 knowledge and experience. And these applications help us to onboard more people and educate, and then show them job opportunities as well, which actually reflect what they have learned, and kind of like match the talent market as well. And that's just like, in one way you can say it's better LinkedIn, but when you look at the application, it's actually a way to stay up to date what's happening in the space and learn about the progress as well.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I know we're over time, but this has been fascinating. I'm super excited to see where this all goes. I'm happy I claimed my Lens profile very early on. And just to wrap up, very last question, Stani, want to hear your thoughts on how are you Defiant?
Well, I think I'm Defiant. I'm natively Defiant because I care about the values that we have in the Web3 communities. That's basically approaching and solving problems through a community perspective, and also staying with the community. So for me, it has been important that over the past years, obviously, like I become more excited about new things, but being able to come back all the time and talk about the excitement things has been very valuable to me. And I think Defiant means being community first, which I really much appreciate.
I love it. Okay. Thanks again for coming on the podcast. This has been amazing. And again, super excited to see where this goes. But I think a Web3 social media network is so very much needed. So yeah, excited to see you build it.
Amazing. Thank you for having me here and being able to share what Lens is.
Of course. Bye.